Plus studio. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of InFocus. I am your host, Patrick Berry. I am luckily and happily joined today by Lisa Ducharme, the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Veterans Chamber of Commerce. She's also she experienced some time at the Pentagon on 9/11 as we celebrate that anniversary. We invited Lisa in here to talk about her experiences during 9/11 from her role at the Pentagon. Good morning, Lisa. Thank you for joining me today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Patrick.
So I guess the question really is I was living in New York City when 9/11 happened. I happened to be traveling on business that day, but I was still living in New York. So my family, my wife, my kids were still there. And, so I have a different experience of 9/11. Even though I was a New Yorker, I was not near ground zero. I was in Midtown.
Right.
But you were at the Pentagon. So what was that morning like, 9/11?
I've always prefaced this by saying my lens is different than most because for me, it was another day of work. The Air Force had prepared me for 9/11 because my first assignment at Clark Air Base in the Philippines, I was the casualty rep for a terrorist attack. I was working Air Force casualty during Khobar Towers from a casualty perspective. So I knew what needed to happen on 9/11. And for me, I had just been up in customer service where we had a TV and we were watching it. And I instinctively knew that I needed to let the commander know what was going on. And he was already watching it on his computer. So as I was coming back, that's when the building shook and then the alarm goes off. So my mind at that moment goes straight into casualty mode. I wasn't the casualty rep, but because of my experience, I knew what needed to be done. And that was the real fascinating and most beginning part of what I had to do that day. And so I went back into the office to make sure everybody was gone. What was interesting is one of our guys was trying to lock the cyber lock on the door.
What does that mean?
So we had secure rooms in the Pentagon that have to have a cyber lock, and the doors are not normal doors. They're made of things you can't just easily break into. And actually, we were told that the fire department had to go through the roof in order to get to some of the people.
Oh, wow.
To see if there was anybody in some areas because you couldn't lock, and they didn't know whether or not anybody was in the room. And so that was part of the challenge. So when we got outside to our designated location, I told everybody, make sure that my kids are called at 3:00 because they get out of school, they have no access to the answering machine, and let them know mom's working. If they know
Right.
mom's working, everything's good. And I needed to call Air Force Casualty. So I said, can anybody help me find a payphone? Because all the cell towers were down.
Well, it's funny, payphones. I mean, payphones weren't even a thing. Your cell phones really weren't that dominant back then as they are today.
Exactly. And they had to shut the cell towers down. And so there were a lot of communication issues. So I went over to Melvin helped me find a payphone. I called the base, but back then the phone trees that we had everybody's desk number. Well, everybody left their desk, so I had nobody to call. Luckily, my background told me to call Air Force Casualty to let them know they had a rep on scene. We had a little bit conversation, went back to the Pentagon, and Melvin said, Lisa, I want to go in there with you because he knew what I was doing.
Right.
And I said, okay, if anybody asks, we're the casualty reps on scene. No questions. If they have problems, send them to me. So we went, and as I was going through, I saw Chief McIntosh, who I didn't know at the time. And I just saw a Chief Master Sergeant. And I told Melvin, I said, let's connect with him in case anybody gives us any crap. He'll take care of it for us. And so I connected with Chief. He happened to be a casualty rep himself. That was his background. And so that worked out perfect because he knew exactly what I needed to do and why I needed to do it. And so Melvin went ahead and did his thing, and I'm looking for anybody who is injured or deceased because that's my job at that moment in time. And I run into Chief Wacko, and he said, Lisa, what about accountability? Chief Wacko was my first sergeant. And I said, Chief, not a problem. I can take care of that. So then I'm working on getting the accountability. So I walk up to people and I say, are you Air Force? They say no, and I walk away. Well, during this time, Melvin wants to volunteer because they're looking for volunteers to go pull the remains from the Pentagon. And so he's willing to go volunteer to do that. So he's going over there, and then I'm continuing my walk. At some point, they say they're not going to get the remains that night, that we got to wait till the next day.
Really?
Because the building's not stable. If anybody who actually saw the Pentagon that day, you'll notice that there's smoke all the way across here, and it was because of all the damage that was done.
So in that picture that you have there, you have a red circle.
Yes.
So you can see right in the front there. That's where the plane hit. What is that red circle?
That red circle was my office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you weren't that far.
No, we weren't. And it was interesting because this came to me the next day after 9/11. This came to me on 9/12. I got this copy. And I thought, wow, you guys are quick. But that was where we were at. That's the Pentagon, or that's the military personnel flight. And so that was part of the challenge, was all of the different smoke and the fires and all of that. So we had to go. And Melvin and I would have been in this area right here.
Okay.
And because Chief McIntosh knew where the triage areas were, we were able to easily find the triage areas. And so I walked around to get everybody's name. And at some point, an Army veteran or Army member says to me, she said, when I asked, and she said she's Army. And then she says to me, well, you don't care about the other branches? And it was at that moment in time that I realized that I was the only one there doing accountability. And it was very interesting that I'm the only casualty rep in an event where you would think everybody would.
Right.
But even our Pentagon casualty rep was sent home as non-mission essential personnel. So my experience to keep me there was the reason that we had a casualty rep. So I can't blame the other services for not having it, because they didn't have my experience. And so we went through, and I then called Air Force Casualty and said, can I give you everybody else's name? If I gather it, will you guys give it to the other branches of the service? And they said yes. And then as soon as we found out that they weren't going to have the remains removed till the next day, we had to go talk to the OSI, the FBI,
Wow.
CIA, everybody who was there, because I need to find out where the remains were going to be. Because part of my job, the next step of my job, is what we call duty status whereabouts unknown.
Okay.
We have to make sure that the families know that there's the possibility, because that's all we can give them at that point, the possibility that their loved one was there.
Right.
And so we had to do that.
All right, we need to take our first break. We are talking with Lisa Ducharme. She is the Massachusetts Veteran Chamber of Commerce representative and a survivor of the Pentagon, as you just heard. We'll be back right after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
We are back now with Lisa Ducharme, the executive director of the Massachusetts Veterans Chamber of Commerce. She was in the Pentagon on 9/11 during those horrific attacks on the United States of America. She shared with us in the first half of the show her experience being at the Pentagon and what it took to save some of those people, some of those lives who were injured, and what to do with some of those who unfortunately lost their lives. We're shifting gears now to what is happening with the military since 9/12, basically. I mean, there's been a renewed sense of U.S. pride since 9/11. But when you got into the military, it wasn't like that.
Not even close. It would be nice if it was. No. So as the daughter of a Vietnam veteran, and my dad served 30 years, so my entire life was the military. And we know what it's like when America doesn't love us and blames the military for different things. And then on 9/12, I got to experience what it was like when America loved us and they supported us and understood, because somebody just hit us in our own backyard.
Right.
We had grown adults crying, not necessarily for the lives lost at that moment, but the fact that somebody attacked us in our own house. And that was
And that
fascinating.
has not happened since Pearl Harbor.
Correct.
And Pearl Harbor, granted, it was Hawaii. Hawaii wasn't a state at that point, but it was still an attack on America.
Exactly. And it was 60 years to the day from when they did the groundbreaking for the Pentagon. The
Oh,
Pentagon, they did it
interesting.
groundbreaking on 1941 9/11. And so you have this renewed patriotism, this new, we are going to support our military, which we didn't have before.
Right.
When I joined the military, you still felt the tension a little bit. When in the 90s, when they did the song Voices That Care, the celebrities came together and said, we really want to support you. We don't care what you're doing. We're here for you as people. And then it got elevated on 9/11. They did a lot of different things on 9/11. The ripple effect was the education benefits for the military. You had a lot of people on 9/11 and 9/12 who actually said they wanted to go in the military.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so many people went because they wanted to protect the nation. And they understood that signing that blank check meant that you may not come home.
Right.
And there have been a lot of organizations that have been set up because of 9/11. Here in Massachusetts, we've always had support for our veterans, and we have really solid support for our veterans.
And we're very lucky here in Massachusetts because of that. We have a number of bases right here in Western Mass. You've got Barnes and Westover,
Yep.
and then you head to the eastern end of the state, and you have several more military bases there. So Massachusetts has been historically, going back to the Revolution,
Exactly.
really very pro-veteran, and veteran friendly.
Yes, absolutely. And that's really nice, and that's helped us out a lot. And since then, a lot of veterans actually started businesses specifically to help other veterans.
Okay.
Since 9/11, and we have the Elizabeth Dole Foundation who's taking care of the caregivers now because we had so many people. And one thing a lot of people don't think about very often, and I wouldn't want to think about it either if I was them, is that right now our 9/11 veterans, if any of them deployed, they are seeing things that none of our military has ever seen before.
Right.
And they're coming back with individuals who may have lost a leg or an arm or both or all. And the injuries that they're coming back with, because of technology, it has actually been so different. And so we're coming around with a lot more invisible wounds. And so, but we've got America who actually supports. Right now, we're kind of back into the neutral stage, but we know that we have the support of the American people.
Is your dad still alive by any chance?
No, he passed last year.
Okay, so he was still around when 9/11 happened.
Yes.
And the ensuing entry in Afghanistan and Iraq of the United States military.
Absolutely.
What were his thoughts on that, having been through Vietnam?
So it's funny because we didn't talk about it until after my son joined the Army in 2006 or 2007. So it was very interesting because he understood the military, but he did not necessarily appreciate the trauma that our folks were being put through.
Right.
Individuals being obnoxious things being done to Americans on camera that our veterans or our military members were watching. The take of Afghanistan, that was a nightmare for everybody. And
Mhm.
I had a lot of resources that we were able to use. And my dad was really happy about all the different resources we had for veterans. So they were very happy.
And it seems as if, and I bring up your father's experience through 9/11 and the ensuing invasions of the United States military in foreign countries.
Yeah.
We went into some of those countries misinformed, which was Vietnam. So your father probably could have those parallels of, hey, I went through this 40 years ago. We're going to a country improperly, for lack of a better
Right.
description.
And the reality is, my dad will tell you, because my dad was intel. My dad would tell you, there's not a single time that we've done anything that we've had all of the
Right.
proper intel
True.
at the moment in time. And we can't connect the dots going forward, but we can connect the dots going back. And let's try not to make the same stupid mistakes we made in the past. And, even though we've made some of the same stupid mistakes, we've done better by how we fix them.
Absolutely. And it's good to know that there's a renewed sense of love for our armed forces. It's and war has changed. Service has changed. We don't need as many boots on the ground now because of technology.
Right.
Technology's changed warfare, but it's never going to go away.
Correct. No, we are always going to have it.
Well, we are up to our second break in today's show. Lisa Ducharme, Executive Director of the Massachusetts Veterans Chamber of Commerce, is joining me today to talk a little bit about her experience at the Pentagon during 9/11 and the military, love of the military since that day. We'll be right back after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back to today's edition of In Focus. I am joined by Lisa Ducharme, the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We're taking a look back on 9/11. Lisa was at the Pentagon on 9/11, 2001, during the attacks on our country. She experienced some horrific sights during that day on 9/11 and the ensuing days. And then we've talked a little bit about the perception of our United States military since that day. Lisa, I want to talk a little bit more now about the lasting impact of 9/11. As you go back in time, it's human nature to lose the details, not necessarily forget about what happened, because we all remember Pearl Harbor. Most of us weren't alive during Pearl Harbor, but that generation will unfortunately pass away. The people who remember the Civil War and the reasons behind the Civil War, long gone. But we're still in the throes of 9/11. Why should we continue to remember it?
I think using World War II as an example is the perfect reason why. Not only did somebody attack us in our own backyard, but one of the most important things is all of the changes that have occurred because of 9/11. We had to get more security focused because of 9/11. We were very laxed in the security realm. In the GPS realm, we were a little bit more relaxed. If we don't remember what it's like to feel the pain, it's been 24 years,
Yeah,
and all the kids who have been born since then have no idea and never lived in the world what it was like before 9/11.
right.
And if we forget, then we're going to lose that sense of awareness that something can happen. I always want people to be situationally aware. I always want people to remember, because I don't ever want to do that again. I don't want somebody to come in our backyard and attack us. It's also important that we remember, because it did happen. And we do have that moment in time that said we all came together.
Right.
And if we could remember 9/12 instead of 9/11, I would be
Exactly.
right there.
Exactly. It's funny you mentioned that. I was just a toddler during Vietnam, and my kids were toddlers during 9/11. And so they don't know any different up until recently. Why do I have to take my shoes off at the airport? They've relaxed that, but it's up to us as the adults in the room to sort of remind them this is what happened. This is the significance of that day.
Yep. And because we had all the towers shut down and we had all kinds of communication gaps, they actually fixed those communication gaps. And over the last 24 years, it's gotten better. And so we can do that. That photo right here was a photo that I got in October of 2011 or 2001. And when I was at Westfield State, I actually hung that photo in the Military Community Excellence Center the day that it opened. And I did that because I wanted to remind myself that life changes in an instant and we have zero control over it.
Yeah.
We have no idea what's going to happen today, but we always count on it being good. But if something bad does happen, are we ready? Are we
Are we
prepared?
prepared?
Are we going to be able to take action, or is it going to paralyze us? Like I said, on 9/11, there were a lot of people who froze. There's a lot of people who cried because somebody came in our own backyard. And to this day, there are still people affected by it 24 years
Oh, yeah.
later. And so let's find the positive things, and let's find a way to remember 9/11 as an opportunity for growth for America and for us to come together.
Yeah, I've been, I don't know whether lucky is the right word, but fortunate enough to go back to New York and see the 9/11 memorial, and it is moving. I've yet to go to Pearl Harbor, but that's on my bucket list. But
Right.
it's one of those museums and those sites, and I'm not sure really what's in Shanksville, PA. I don't know if you've been there, or
No.
is there a museum? I'm not sure what's there, but the 9/11 memorial, there's areas outside the Pentagon that are memorials,
Yeah.
but go to these. Take your kids there so they understand the impact of what those events were to the United States and the world.
Because it was a day that changed history. It
A
changed
day
the,
that will live in infamy. What was that?
yeah,
Roosevelt, right?
exactly. And the thing is, it changed it for the military too. And we are better off as veterans because of 9/11. We would not have the post 9/11 GI Bill, the education
Right.
benefits. We also need to understand why those type of things are important to give to our military while they're on active duty and when they get out as veterans. It's also important because it's your military that are going to fight once somebody attacks us, the military is going to step in. While it's happening, you have your first responders who are taking care of doing it, putting their lives on the line during those times. But once that's over and the dust is settled, the military is going to be the one that's going to come in and do what we can.
And if you have a young member of your family who's interested in either joining the military or becoming a local emergency services
Yeah.
personnel, support them, because without them, we're really at risk.
Absolutely, 100%.
Lisa, I want to thank you so very much for joining me today, sharing your story. There's a way to support local veterans here in Massachusetts coming up in early November. It's local.
National Veteran Small Business Week. It's November 3rd to November 7th, which is always the week before Veterans Day, and then support our veterans on Veterans Day, November 11th.
Fantastic. Lisa, thank you so very much for joining me, and thank you very much for your service to our country.
Thank you.